Welcome back to 340 Paddler. We're into week 11 of the training program, and there's some changes coming up. So we're coming off that rest week. We want to get you out on the water. Obviously, we want to get you out there for the 340, but you're going to need to get out there before that. So let's start with cardio, and this is where things are going to start splitting a little bit. Now, your goal for last week was that rest week where you're doing 20 to 30 minutes of your activity 3 times a week, taking it easy. And this was the phase 1 progression for running. So here we were moving up from basically 10 minutes 3 times a week of running to 4 miles 3 times a week. So you're up to around 12 miles a week, give or take. Now, if you are simply looking to finish, or you're looking for, say, a 60 to 65 hour finish, you probably don't need to go beyond this. What you would do is, continuing through the program, your cardio is always going to be about 4 miles. You can bring it up a little bit if you want, but this is perfectly fine. 4 miles 3 times a week is perfectly sufficient to get you that 60 to 65 hour finish. Now, what if you want to go sub 50? That's where this comes in. This is the phase 2 progression. And as you see, we're going to keep the 4-mile runs, but then one run, our long day run, will increase. So week 11, it increases to one 5-mile run. Week 12 to 6 miles, 7 miles, 8 miles. Week 15 is a rest week. So you draw it back, but because of the mileage, we're probably going to draw it back to 3 3-mile runs, 3 4-mile runs, somewhere in there. And then 16, 17, 18. Once you get to 2 4-mile runs and a 10-mile run, you can start increasing those 4s if you want, up to 5 and 6. And you get the idea. We're only adding a mile per week. And it seems like very little, but again, we're trying to avoid some of those injuries. Basically, once your long run gets to 10 miles, you're where you need to be. Don't worry about it from there. You do not need to increase beyond that. I've increased up to 15 miles. It's not necessary, I would say. And actually, it probably starts to hinder at some point because it takes you longer to recover. Now, what I'm going to do is that progression is there, that long day. We'll bring it up in the future, but my focus here is on finishing in 60 to 65 hours. So keep that in mind if you're trying for sub 50. If you're more that 60, 65 hour range, you're going to be looking at this. This is our standard cardio. As I said, it'll stay the same. So running will be 4 miles 3 times a week. Biking, 45 minutes 3 times a week. Swim about 40 minutes, give or take. I realize there are conversions with swim that I'm not as familiar with. The difference here is now that we're used to it, you're slowly going to try and bring down your time. When it comes to the run, I track my minutes per mile average. Same thing for bike. You're doing 45 minutes, but you want to increase the number of meters or kilometers you're doing during that period of time. Swim, same thing. Increasing the distance a little bit every time. You want to see incremental increase. So, cardio, if you're doing 60 and over as a goal time, you're going to stick with this. If you're going sub 50, this is what you want to follow, getting up to that 10-mile run. Why the 10-mile run? Well, we'll get to that with long days in a second. First, I want to go back to intervals for a moment and just make sure that you're doing your intervals. You're probably a week or two into intervals at this point, and you should start to see some increases. So, for example, if you're doing 5-minute repeats, you should see that you're going a little bit further every session. You should see the same thing if you're doing 1 minute on, 1 minute off, or even longer intervals, which is why it's going to be important to track your intervals, but we'll talk about that in a future video. So you should be doing intervals twice a week, 3 runs a week, and then a long day paddle. Let's talk about the long day. The long day in this program is brutal. So there will be a couple of options for you. There's sort of the sub 50 option, and then everyone else. And it's based on, or the sub 50 version is based on a brick workout. The idea is we're going to burn you out to the point where you're not getting any more improvement, muscular improvement, and then we're going to change the muscle groups. So what I do, or did in 16, 17, 18, for my long days, I would do a long day paddle plus a long run. What did that mean in practicality? That meant 2+ hours in the boat, put away the boat, put on my shoes, go for a 10-mile run. It means 4 hours of continuous activity at a high level. Now, you could alter this a little bit. You could do a longer paddle with a shorter run. Maybe you're just not going to do a 10-mile run. You want to do, say 3 hours in the boat and a 4-mile run. That's perfectly fine. But the idea is once we burn out your upper body, we want to continue to burn those muscles. We want to continue to expend energy so that your body gets used to storing more energy. So it's basically bonk training, training your body to hold on to energy to be more efficient, because you're kind of tricking your body into the idea that things will just get longer and longer. Although I never go past about 2.5 hours and 10 miles myself. So that's the goal. If you don't want to run at all, you could work your long paddle up to 6 hours. And the best way to do this, really, if you have the chance, is to split that in a 24-hour period. So you're doing 2 3-hour paddles. The reason is you'll do 2 3-hour paddles much faster than 1 6-hour paddle. And of course, while you're doing this, you're watching equipment, chafing, nutrition, etc. So a couple of different options. If you're shooting for the sub 50, you should be back here doing your boat and run. If you're looking for 60 to 65, then do a little longer paddle and a shorter run. So you would do, say, a 3-hour paddle and a 4-mile or 5-mile run. And it doesn't have to be a fast run. You will never hit the times after getting out of the boat that you do when you're fresh and just out running. So put that out of your mind. If you're going for just finishing, then do this. Work up to the 6-hour paddle. So a couple of different options this week, depending on what your goals are. And say you start down the sub 50 route and you don't quite make it, you can always go back to the other side. You can always come back to that 60, 65 hour finish group and do that. That's perfectly fine. When do I do this? I do it on Fridays because in the spring I don't usually teach on Fridays, but you could do this on a weekend. You could do this early in the morning, late in the evening. And with these splits, you don't have to do them exactly back to back. I prefer it that way, but if you do one in the morning, say the paddle early in the morning, and then you have other things to do during the day, and then you do the run in the evening, perfectly fine. It gets across the same basic principle. So we're just trying to get you to the finish and hopefully get you to the finish in the appropriate shape, shall we say, that you can really enjoy yourself instead of, kind of crawling around, suffering continuously. So, questions, comments, concerns, quarrels, qualms, quandaries, curse words, leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, this is 340 Paddler, hoping that you keep your paddle in the water.